Okay, so next we are going to introduce Renee and Patrick. This presentation will focus on supporting family connections when relative or kin are the foster care placement. So a lot of you have been asking for this information. A lot of folks have been giving feedback that it's very different when the foster care placement is relative or kin. And so this is a presentation that's going to solely focus on that. Renee Banis is the program supervisor for the KinLink 30 Days to Family program at Ampersand Families here in Minnesota. She's a second generation adoptee of an Anishinaabe mother, and she has been passionate in working on Ampersand's initiative to move forward in keeping kids connected to family, community, and culture. Patrick Passani is a coach and trainer at the Institute for Child Welfare Innovation in St. Louis, Missouri. He has over 14 years of experience in the child welfare field, from foster care case management, child abuse and neglect investigation, and relative and foster home training and licensing. In 2015, Patrick began working as a 30 Days to Family specialist, conducting diligent and exhaustive search and engagement efforts for family members of children who were just entering the child welfare system. So these two presenters are going to offer insight into the unique family dynamics at play and how to facilitate these relationships in meaningful and healthy ways, which will be supportive for parents, children, and their family systems. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for Q&A. We will provide the presenters' contact information, and they encourage you to reach out. So welcome, Renee and Patrick.
All right. Go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's awesome to be here. And so, again, my name is Patrick Passani, and I am sort of tasked with kind of setting up the tone, laying the foundation for sort of what we're going to be talking about with regard to family connections, and doing what we can as professionals to make sure that the children that we're serving are connected to family members when they come into the system, but also those kids that have been in care maybe for months, maybe years, even decades or more, that maybe have been cut off from their extended family support networks. And there's a lot of push within the field right now to sort of reverse that trend and make sure that we're valuing and prioritizing family connections for both kids that have just entered the system and kind of going back and reevaluating the work that's been done with kids that have maybe been lingering in the system for a long time. And so, it's important as we get started here to sort of, again, lay the foundation philosophically for what it is we're trying to accomplish when we think about family connections. We now live and work in a field that, child welfare in general, at a time where we know sort of it's not an opinion anymore that children do better in almost every outcome we can measure when they are not only placed with family members after coming into care, but linked in maintaining meaningful connections with those family. Reunification occurs more quickly. They're more likely to be placed with siblings, less likely to experience placement disruption and having to move from place to place to place if we're able to get them with family. And so knowing that we're sort of living in that environment where it's not a question and not a debate as to what the best outcomes for children are, we are sort of, it's our responsibility to kind of mold the system that we work in into being more family friendly, for lack of a better way to put it, and prioritizing maintaining those family connections as much as we can for the children that we're working with. And so in terms of the way that we want to advocate for rethinking how we as a system approach family involvement, many of you that are on here have probably experienced or at least heard about relatives that are wanting to become involved with children that are in care in some capacity, whether it's providing care or having, placement of the kids that they're related to, or just wanting to be involved as an emotional support or something more tangible like respite or babysitting or financial support to the parents, being involved in these cases in some capacity. But I'd be willing to bet that many of you have also seen and experienced family members being ruled out, passed over, or maybe even not contacted in the first place, because as we all know, case management in particular is such a demanding and such a incredibly difficult job that we don't even have enough hours in the day to contact maybe beyond a handful of relatives that maybe the parents made us aware of, let alone be able to sit down and actually search for a wide population of extended family members to reach out to. But we have to try to make those steps to sort of reprioritize our work, especially when these children first enter the system. And so instead of, asking ourselves or telling ourselves that we can't involve family because of reason A, B, C, or D, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or we explore a couple of family members that were brought to our attention, but there are some things on their background checks that we instantly sort of take at face value, and without even asking the family members about it, we'll kind of just pass them by or rule them out, or just decide that for the sake of safety, we have to leave that child in a traditional foster setting because we know that that family is licensed and trained, and we feel way more comfortable with ourselves that they're in a safe spot and we've done our jobs. But it takes more work to get that child with family members because we have to navigate some of those more trickier issues. But we also know that if we can get them there and we can get those connections made, that they're much better off in the long run. And the outcomes that we see both during the time they're in care and after the fact are much more positive. And so asking ourselves as a system, are we content with what we have right now? If our own children, if our own loved ones suddenly had to be a part of the child welfare system, would we be okay and feel comfortable with the fact that they were at least well taken care of? And I know from a lot of my colleagues and my own personal thoughts that many of us would say no, that the system is intrinsically flawed and that we wouldn't feel comfortable with our own loved ones being a part of it. And yet we often expect that sort of compliance and that partnering with families or with parents without really giving enough attention to the fact that they're just worried about their children entering into our care, so to speak. And so asking ourselves, what would we want done for our own family? Would we want a worker to, if my child came into care, would I be content with them contacting my brother and my parents and calling that diligent search for relatives? Or would I want them to sit down and contact all of my aunts and uncles, maybe great aunts and uncles, cousins, not to mention all of my non-blood kin who are very important parts of my life that would be devastating if my child lost contact with or weren't even given the opportunity to be involved? I would like to think that I wouldn't stand for that. And yet sometimes we expect a lot of our parents to sort of live with that. Hey, we reached out to who you told us to, and none of them could be involved, or they have background check issues, so we're just going to move on. And so we can do better, and we can work harder to get them connected with family. And so, again, with those next two bullets, when we are engaging with family members, do we hold them to higher standards than maybe we would hold a traditional foster parent or someone, we're expecting for them to be entering into engaging with us with a clear background check. And we look at maybe an aunt who's wanting to care for her niece and nephew, and she has a DWI from last year. And are we using that as an excuse to just stop our engagement and stop our assessment of her right then and there? Whereas when we might be assessing a traditional foster home to become licensed, and we find a DWI on the record of the foster mom who's trying to become licensed as a foster parent, would we just dismiss them right there? Or would we try to work through it and listen to their side of the story and really determine how it's not going to be a safety issue and then proceed with their licensing? And so, does that double standard exist? And kind of going along with that, do we as a system, put kids at a detriment and keep them disconnected from loved ones, from extended family members because of red flags or risk issues that we are qualifying rather as safety? Are we saying that child can't be living with his aunt because she had a DWI a year ago? Is that a true safety concern? Is that a legitimate reason to keep those two individuals separated? Or is that just a risk factor or a red flag, as we like to say, red flags versus red light, that just needs some deep, meaningful engagement and some courageous conversations, some safety planning, and some partnering so that we can overcome that and get this child with family where they belong? And so just a little bit of exploration in terms of what we like to call like the power dynamics that we know exist within the system. And again, I think that these are a lot of things that we're sort of aware of, at least cursorily or on a superficial level, but maybe because we're all busy professionals, don't take enough time to really think about how this is affecting the families and parents that we're working with. So when we're engaging with members of the family and the parents, they are naturally in a state of fear and naturally in a state of distrust. I mean, we just took away their children. And regardless of the reasons why that happened, they have no incentive to go into this situation feeling like we have their best interests at heart. And so we are having to fight an uphill battle to even make rapport and establish rapport with parents, especially when we're beginning to work with them because they're experiencing fear. Maybe they've been involved with the system before and been even burned by it before, and that's contributing to their levels of distrust too. Anger, how many times do we, hold it against a mom who storms out of a court hearing or, has a meltdown during a team meeting and use that as an example of why, she is unstable and, more evidence of why she's unsafe for her children and not really taking into account how we might react in a similar situation. And the guilt and the shame and all of those other complex emotions that are surrounding that, just right off the bat, let alone these families that have been involved with us for years. And then, we as professionals, without intending to, will enter the situation with an intimidating presence, with our clipboard and our tie and our, expertise and confusing language like assessment and so is appropriate. And we're conducting investigations and making sure that you're not the perpetrator and permanency. And do we take enough time to actually sit down and explain those things, or maybe even alter the way that we're speaking to individuals in order to let them know that we're actually wanting to approach them with empathy and acceptance. And that, if we're going to actually make any headway here, we're going to have to work as a team. And so we have to get rid of these power dynamics and stop treating families, stop treating parents like clients, and actually start thinking of them and treating them like team members the same way we would our colleagues. Certainly, they're not getting paid the same way we are as professionals, but their cooperation, their teamwork is every bit as important on these cases and for success as our participation is. And so why don't we foster that? Why don't we, really try to build that rapport and again, approach the parents, especially with empathy and understanding instead of judgment and, not giving them the benefit of the doubt. And so what we want to do is shift. The partner dynamics are what we want to take over for these power dynamics. And so, we want our parents especially to feel valued as individuals that have strengths, and not just the parents, but then by extension, their entire extended family. So let's stop with the apple doesn't fall far from the tree mentality. Or, I know for a fact that all of mom's siblings have been in the system before too, with their own children. And, her father is actually incarcerated. So there's no way any of these people are going to be able to be involved. And so we know that that's just rubbish, that every single person in the family has something that they can contribute regardless of their situation. Maybe they're not going to be approved to be able to provide direct care because of significant background issues, but even someone that's incarcerated. I've had many conversations with family members that are serving life sentences in jail or in prison that are able to tell me so much information about their family, who I should reach out to, who in the family system is going to be important in making any sort of plan we have for the future work. And I remember myself as a young, child welfare professional, and being presented with those types of individuals. And I know that I used to think, like, why would I waste my precious, valuable time that I don't have enough of already reaching out to grandpa who's in prison? Because there's no way he's going to be able to be involved anyway. But getting rid of that mentality and really valuing that every single individual within these families has strengths. Whether they choose to bring those to the table is their decision, but we have to give them that opportunity. And so again, kind of reiterating that only the members of the family are the experts on their own family. We can't look at a child abuse neglect history or a court report or a background check and feel like we have all of the information that we need to fully assess these relatives. The good, the bad, and the ugly, they are the ones that know what's really going on and what really is the heart of the matter of what needs to be addressed within the family system. And so we have to tap into that and respect where they're coming from in that regard. We have to keep in mind that family members don't have the knowledge, tools, and ability to reach out to us. It's one of my favorites. I've heard that many, many times about family involvement. This kid's been in care 5 years. So if anyone in the family really wanted to be involved with this child, they would have come forward right now. So why would we start this, any kind of intense family finding process now? Like, they had their opportunity. This child's been here forever. And again, I'm sure many of you have encountered situations where even aunts, uncles, grandparents are suddenly brought into the fold, and we're like, hey, had I been notified, had anyone told me about this, I would have done more earlier, and not take for granted the fact that they just know what's going on. It is our job as the professionals to find them and actively bring them into the system. And we have to abandon the savior mentality, a mentality that I know I had very young coming into the system, and I know a lot of new workers still experience, that I'm going to come into this system and I'm going to help these kids. They're in terrible situations, and I'm going to pluck them out of their homes where they're unsafe and get them into a licensed, approved, loving home far away from, the poverty area where they were living in. And now they're going to a much better school, and not thinking for a minute about the trauma and the pain that we are inflicting on that child without even realizing it, because we're removing them from their people, from their environment, and all of the things that have been supportive for them in the past. And so, through these kind of retooling of our perspective, retooling of the way that we're thinking about family involvement, we can slowly start to shift that power dynamic down and start to really treat these family members and the parents as partners. And so that brings us to 30 Days to Family, as you heard mentioned in our introductions. And as was stated about my own experience, I was a 30 Days to Family specialist here in St. Louis, Missouri for a number of years. And we're now replicating the model with Renee and her group in Minnesota, and are super excited about it. The program was designed in St. Louis, Missouri in 2011, so it's about 11 years old now. And what it is a very intense, fast-paced 30-day search for relatives and kin from the moment they enter into the system. So we start with children that, day one, we're there at the initial court hearing, and we immediately start engaging with family at that very moment. And not to say that all of our cases are open for a full 30 days, but we work to identify a minimum of 80 relatives. Often it's much more than that, 200-300 in some cases. We identify not only one family placement option, but at least 2 backups. So just in case something were to go wrong in that first placement, that child doesn't end up back in traditional foster care. There's other family systems. And we outline, as it says there, a robust network of supports that really sustains the stability of that placement and doesn't take for granted that, okay, even though these are family members, they still need all of our support and all of our resources and all of our help to make this work, even more so than our traditional foster parents do, because foster parents know what they're getting into a little bit more, where we're asking our relative providers to kind of jump into this all of a sudden. And so again, 30 Days to Family is in its strict sense designed for kids that have just entered the system, but the philosophies and the practices that sort of underline it can be applied to children anywhere at any point within the system. So with that, I will turn it over to Renee.
Thanks, Patrick. So just briefly, about our agency and just kind of what we do. So Ampersand Families is one of the 5 agencies in Minnesota contracted with the public and private adoption initiative with the state. So our work began about 13 years ago and was really focused on just permanency and support for older youth and families. So in recent years, we've kind of recognized the need to dig a little deeper and help more with relative kin families specifically. So back in fall of 2021, so not very long ago, we started piloting the 30 Days to Family program. And the 30 Days to Family program really fits in with our kind of our menu of services for our KinLink program, all which is geared towards the intensive early on family search and engagement that we really do very well in replicating the 30 Days to Family program. So just some of the values that kind of center us in our work in KinLink and working with relative kin at our agency is that belonging to a family is a basic human right, and that children should be raised by people, not programs. All people have to be treated with dignity, whatever their family story and whatever their personal challenges. And then having hope for the future sustains us when life feels hard and we lack control. We believe very strongly that children have a right to remain connected to their people, and that we know preserving the connections from the get-go is a whole lot easier than trying to restore the connections further on down the road. So professionals are the bridge when it comes to making the extra efforts towards family preservations. Workers have the ability to set the tone of empowerment, value the strengths of all family members, and then help family members collaborate towards success. Being outside of the family without a high emotional investment, we can be that kind of calm, objective party to center a lot of those difficult conversations between family members. Lean on culturally relevant community partners and collaborate. So we don't do our best work siloed. In our KinLink program, for example, we communicate really frequently across teams at Ampersand Families, across teams with our county partners. We also do quite a bit of networking out in the community, especially with culturally responsive communities who can kind of do that ongoing support that youth and families need. Always seek out consultation and fresh perspectives. So we know that this is high stress work, fraught with vicarious trauma. So when we work together, we kind of relieve that pressure to be making all of these huge decisions we have to make every day. And then, especially as we engage with relative families and we kind of uncover the generational trauma, some complicated family dynamics, that consultation and support becomes really, really necessary as we navigate some of these difficult conversations and just help families work towards better, more healthy communication. And then just remember our shared passion as child welfare workers, give each other grace as we just navigate these systems for families. And honoring parents, very, very important. So we have to be careful about the types of language we use when we refer to parents. For instance, the term birth parent, for example, is hurtful to a grandma who's caring for her daughter's children. To her, mom is always going to be mom. So we just always strive to use really family-centered, inclusive language, even when talking amongst other professionals on the case. Don't forget dads. So dads really have a hard time with custody laws here in Minnesota. They're not always favorable to dads, but dads care very, very deeply about their children. So it's really important to loop them in as soon as possible, help them establish paternity if that's something that's needed, keep them and their family members informed of what's going on in the case. So we recently had a 30 Days to Family case where the mom didn't know the whereabouts of dad. She thought he was in jail last time she knew where he was. So our 30 Days to Family specialist, with her sleuthing efforts, was able to track down dad, who is now living in Mexico. Since she's Spanish speaking, she was able to connect with him via WhatsApp. And he was so grateful that somebody took the time to contact him. And he had no idea his daughter was in care. And now that he's looped into the case and what's going on, he's able to establish some regular phone visitation. So really cool thing when you can get dads involved. And then help parents navigate the gravity of the process with empathy and acceptance. Yeah, that's a difficult one because, like Patrick said, the language that we use is very convoluted to somebody who's just finding them in this horrible situation. So we want to use a strength-based approach. We know that the parents and families are very overwhelmed when they come to us. They're tired, frustrated. They happen to be going through one of the worst experiences of their life. And parents are not presenting their best selves to us or their other family members. So just kind of centering those conversations, helping them understand the language, and then even better, maybe helping them find a parent-to-parent mentor out in the community who can really talk to them and connect with them at a real level. And then the last thing here is be advocates for system change. So we know there's a lot of frustrating things in our work that we're up against: permanency timelines, a lack of childcare funding for families. All these things are good reasons to write to your representative or join a working group working on policy change, do a blog post, whatever you can do, however small, just be advocates. So the child's placed with family. Now what? We want to build strong, sustainable layers of support. And in those support plans, always address the who, what, when, and where. So we're partnering with families. We're laying the groundwork with them so they can take care of each other. In our program with KinLink and 30 Days to Family, we like to build the natural supports. We like to go deep and really do some specifics, especially with the details. So if a mom says, hey, my sister usually brings my kids to church, we'll find that auntie, get her contact info, find out when she brings the kids to church, when she'd bring them back to the foster home, make sure that we connect foster parent and that auntie so that so that they're familiar with each other and they know each other's phone numbers. Just be really intentional about bridging those connections amongst family members, particularly the supports. And then we assist in initial conversations between the parents and families. With many families, there's some tough conversations that are going to be there. There's feelings of grief, loss, some conflict can often rise to the surface. So workers can help to center those conversations, help family members kind of put aside those differences, all on focusing on just really providing a healthy, loving environment for those kids. And then also we can help guide families towards specific resources in the community, like family therapy and support groups. And then we just know that those natural family supports that we take the time to build right away, while the kids are in care, are going to be the natural supports that are there for families after reunification, and really ultimately what parents are going to need for their long-term success in parenting. So here is a list, by no means exhaustive, of some of the resources for families in Minnesota. A few of these are national groups, but we just really stress to families the importance of getting support, but also being very intentional about finding what support groups are going to work for families, because it's just a little extra legwork we as workers can do, so that families can kind of do that hard work of healing. And we, just build this support for them early on so that they can have access to those things. Okay, and we kind of walked right through all this information in a quick 30 minutes. So our contact info is available. So if anyone has any questions about 30 Days to Family or our relative kin family work, please shoot us an email. Where Patrick and I are always helpful. I think when there's questions, we will answer them. So thank you so much for having us, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Renee and Patrick. It's always nice to hear about kind of innovative organizational programs, and we're hopeful that lots of the audience members will reach out to learn more.